Earthquakes are an important phenomenon in our life. It's not just something which happens in Asia, it also happens in Europe.
Scientists and public authorities from southern European countries have decided to carry out a research project called RISC-UE, aimed at managing seismic risk and mitigating the impact of prospective earthquakes in European towns. The research team consists of 17 partners from universities, public and private sector organizations: Barcelona, Spain, Bitola, Republic of Macedonia, Nice, France, Catania, Italy, Thessalonica, Greece, Sofia, Bulgaria, and Bucharest, Romania are the 7 cities participating in RISC-UE as stakeholders and places to test the methodology. When confronted with seismic risk, politicians from the partner cities express 3 main issues: urban planning, as in Thessalonica,
προσαρμόσουμε τα προγράμματά μας σε αυτά που μας δίνει η πολιτεία. Δεν είναι λίγα αυτά που κάναμε. Επαναλαμβάνω, θα μπορούσαμε να κάνουμε περισσότερα. Υπάρχει ένα πρόβλημα στην Ελλάδα.
protection of buildings, as in Bitola,
Objects which are on the cultural protections are damaging, and damaged that it was for us to protect them.
emergency preparedness, as in Nice,
essayer de coordonner des études et nous permettre après d'anticiper sur les plans de secours et donc fournir justement aux opérationnels les données qui leur permettront d'avoir des plans de secours le plus efficaces possible.
Decision makers in earthquake-prone cities need an evaluation of the possible impact of an earthquake in their cities, and this is the reason why we developed the RISC-UE project with a general and a modular methodology for creating seismic scenarios and concentrating about the distinctive European features of the cities.
We want to develop methodologies and scenarios, how we can better manage earthquakes, how we can soften and mitigate the results of the earthquake. We cannot avoid them, but we can contain the damage.
human and physical damage and socio-economic losses depend on the level of earthquake hazard and on the vulnerability of building stock and vital infrastructures. To assess seismic risk in a city, the first task is to evaluate the seismic hazard. All available information on tectonic features, historic earthquakes, magnitude levels, seismic sources, geotechnical zonation of the region is necessary to estimate intensity and ground shaking hazards which may occur in different parts of the city. 2 levels of assessment have been addressed.
The probabilistic one is better suited for resource allocation in the perspective of reduction of risk. The deterministic viewpoint essentially tries to reconstruct what would happen today if an earthquake that hit already the city in the past would occur again.
These 2 levels of assessment are necessary to further determine the highest probability prospective earthquake in a particular locality.
Catania was the one with the most severe seismic history, having suffered 2 devastating earthquakes in a period of 1,000 years, one in 1167 and another one in 1693, magnitude about 7 events, and the intensity of those earthquakes range typically between 10-11 and 8-9.
Hazard assessment teams have also validated models and GIS databases to provide ground shaking parameters for the development of scenarios. Ground shaking at a particular place depends partly on soil characteristics. Soil often amplifies seismic hazard. It is subject to liquefaction and landsliding. In Bucharest and Nice, the soil increases seismic motion.
Local soil conditions that are not very favorable for the ground motions. In particular, the presence of deep soils susceptible to strongly amplify the ground motion coming from distant earthquakes.
Thessalonica's history has made for a complex soil structure.
Layer of 5 to 12 meters of everything. Stones, bricks, soil, which is not soil. This has no proper properties and well-described properties. It is a special feature of all ancient cities. Rome has the same problem, Constantinople has the same problem, Athens a little bit, Thessaloniki is very important.
The second task is to assess the vulnerability of buildings.
Bucharest is the most dangerous, most vulnerable capital of Europe. The problem comes from a set of about 100 buildings built in between the walls in the city center.
They are not frames with infill masonry, they are masonry with infill frames, because finally the resistance comes from masonry, not from columns. And if we don't have masonry as a ground floor, which is also maybe 30% case in the city center because due to the shops, in that case we have a big trouble for the next earthquake.
Euro-Mediterranean towns, unlike those in Asia and America, have not been studied using current methods for establishing earthquake vulnerability and scenarios. To assess vulnerability, RISC-UE has established a building typology matrix of present building stock on the basis of known structural behavior under seismic loading. Historic city centers and heritage monuments, traditional masonry buildings, lifeline networks, and many reinforced concrete buildings erected between the 60s and the 80s are generally sensitive to seismic hazard.
Up the building typology matter was a challenge in itself, because when we started this project and we had a look at what was available, most of it was from the American literature, and we very soon realized that this was simply not good enough for Europe.
For scenarios to be simulated, two approaches to vulnerability analysis have also been adopted.
Vulnerability level 1 approach is related to a European macroseismic scale of 98, and a vulnerability level 2 approach, it is related to some analytical procedure which have been proposed and improved with the National Building Institute of America in cooperation with the RMS solution, and finally finalized under a software product so-called HAZUS.
In historic city centers, the situation of a building within the aggregate influences its vulnerability.
We must consider that some buildings were built isolated, then other buildings are added, and other are built in order to obstruct the free areas.
Aggravating factors are irregularity of blocks in plan or elevation, differences in level, or overloading of floors. Archaeological sites, monuments, and historic buildings are of great importance in Mediterranean towns. Santa Maria del Mar in Barcelona is a Gothic masonry church which suffered earthquake damage in the Middle Ages. With models, it is possible to simulate the prospective impact of earthquakes on its walls and arches.
The city of Barcelona has been preparing, it's published, the local emergency plan for earthquakes. In these plans, the evaluation of the assessment of the vulnerability was done in a very approximate, in a very rough way.
Vulnerability in Barcelona is very high. Vulnerability is high due to the type of building we have here, whose behavior during earthquake wouldn't be a good one. They are not ductile buildings.
Is that what you mean? The second important group of city elements to be assessed is lifelines. All the networks which enable the city to function, drinking water, sewage waste, electricity, telecommunications and highways, tunnels and bridges. If they are essential at normal times, they are critical during a crisis. But data on lifelines is difficult to collect.
One of the main difficulties is probably to collect data, since lifelines are composed of many components. The vulnerability assessment is obviously very difficult when we don't know precisely what is the geometrical and the material description of the pipe.
Developing risk scenarios also requires other urban data and a more global approach.
This global assessment needs to have an interdisciplinary approach. That is not only the earthquake engineering approach, but also the urbanistic, cultural approach of risk.
Important facilities such as hospitals, schools, government offices, water supply systems and power networks need to be analysed individually. To validate the efficiency of rescue and firefighting operations, simulations are also carried out on road blocking by collapsed buildings and abandoned vehicles.
This is for the comparison for the two types of earthquake scenarios, the destructive and the damaging one. You see that the impact is substantially different, and whereas in the first case we have a catastrophic impact, in the second case the destructive impact is limited only to a few sections of the city.
Seismic scenarios enable city administrators to identify the most earthquake-prone areas and define priorities for action plans to rehabilitate and reinforce certain types of buildings and monuments. In each participating town, RISC-UE has contributed to the creation of homogeneous GIS databases. These state-of-the-art tools support better understanding between scientists, engineers, planners and city governors.
I put this slide. This is a distribution of damages after the Bitola earthquake. This is another way of looking at the city of Bitola.
Modular scenarios have been developed that allow future users to select methods and implement varying degrees of precision depending on the size of buildings and the availability of physical and financial resources.
What we will give finally is the administration will define a certain scenario, and for each city he will have a complete description of the damages and of the losses, and with their spatial variability and spatial distribution. So they will be able to define the places where they must put much more effort before the crisis for retrofitting, for changing and so on. And during the crisis, they will know quite well what kind of efforts should be deployed in a specific place, in a specific region, in a specific time. So they will be much better organized.
To protect the citizen against the threats of earthquakes. I repeat again, we cannot avoid them, but what we can do is to mitigate their impact by pooling experiences, best knowledge, best experiences, and also practices from different parts of Europe, and then arrive at very good solutions which then could also be made available to countries outside Europe.
Earthquake is not only a problem that belongs to engineers or seismologists, it belongs to everybody, and the education to teachers, to everyone must have some culture for this.
There are other many cities in Europe under, or so to say, at risk.
Don't ever let me be. I only wanna be by your side. Please don't ever let me be. I only wanna be by your side. Girl, you really got me now. You got me so I don't know what I'm doing, yeah. Oh yeah, you really got me now. Got me so I can't sleep at night. You really got me. You really got me. You really got me. Oh no, no. Girl, you really got me now. You got me so